Chaos once governed the ancient marketplace, with every trade and construction project a potential dispute. This was the world before standardized measurement, a reality our ancestors fought to tame. The Greek philosopher Protagoras declared that man is the measure of all things, a statement that reveals the deeply human origins of this quest. By the end of this journey, you will understand how the ruler in your desk drawer is a direct descendant of the royal cubits that built the pyramids. How did a simple barley grain become the foundation for international trade? And why would a king's authority hinge on the length of a carved stone rod? We will trace the epic story of measurement from the human body to the birth of global standards, a tale of power, ingenuity, and the relentless pursuit of order. What part of our modern world would crumble first if we lost our shared rules for measuring it? That Neolithic farmer, standing in a field of golden grain, held the entire future of measurement in their hands. Their simple trade, a basket of grain for a tool or some cloth, was the crucible where standardization was born. Without a shared rule, every transaction relied on trust and rough estimation. So they turned to the most readily available and universal tool they possessed, their own bodies. A hand's breadth became a unit of length. The distance from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger gave us the cubit. A full stride defined a pace. These were the primordial seeds from which all measurement would grow, deeply personal and instantly understandable. But herein lay the problem. My forearm is not the same as your forearm. My stride is not your stride. This created a patchwork of local standards, a true Tower of Babel where a cubit in one village might be significantly shorter than a cubit in the next. This variability was more than an inconvenience. It was a barrier to trade and large-scale cooperation. Archaeologists studying these early societies note that the very act of creating these rudimentary units, however imperfect, was a monumental leap. It was the foundation for social organization, for fairly distributing resources, and for building the first permanent structures. This intimate, body-centered system connected measurement to human experience in a way we have since lost. Yet, for civilization to truly flourish, this personal scale had to be transcended. The solution would emerge not from the individual body, but from the grand, predictable rhythms of the natural world, starting in the fertile river valleys that cradled humanity's first great cities. The fertile plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers gave rise to a new kind of human society, one that demanded a new kind of order. In the shadow of the great ziggurats, where thousands labored on colossal construction projects, the whims of the individual body were no longer sufficient. The solution emerged from the heart of the temple and the palace, a top-down imposition of uniformity that would forever change the relationship between power and measurement. Royal scribes, using the sharp triangular stylus to press marks into wet clay, documented the birth of this new system. They decreed the official length of the cubit, a standard no longer tied to a local chieftain's arm, but to a precisely carved stone rod kept in a temple vault. Imagine the impact of this single object. For the first time, a builder in one city and a surveyor in another could work from the same immutable reference, ensuring that the grand irrigation canals that fed the empire were straight and true, and that the temple walls rose at perfect angles. This was the institutionalization of measurement, a tool for control as much as for construction. The most profound innovation, however, was weight. The shekel, a unit originally defined by a specific volume of barley grain, became the bedrock of Mesopotamian commerce and taxation. A merchant could now travel from Ur to Uruk confident that the weight of his silver was recognized and accepted. This reliability was the lifeblood of a complex economy, but it was also the mechanism of the state. Taxes were assessed and collected based on these standard weights, funneling resources directly to the central authority. This shift from the personal to the institutional was a quiet revolution. It replaced the variable human form with an abstract, state-sanctioned ideal, a concept so powerful it would echo for millennia. Yet, while the Mesopotamians mastered the land and its commerce, another civilization was looking to the heavens, seeking a standard of measurement not from a king's decree, but from the cosmos itself. While the Mesopotamians imposed order from the palace, the Egyptians found theirs written in the stars and mirrored in the life-giving Nile. Each year, the river's predictable floodwaters would rise, swallowing the fields and wiping the land clean of every boundary marker. When the waters receded, leaving behind a fresh layer of fertile black silt, a critical task began. Farmers needed to know which plot of land was theirs. The very survival of the society depended on a system of land surveying so precise and reliable it could rebuild the world from scratch, year after year. This was not merely a practical chore, it was the foundation of the Egyptian state, a demonstration of power rooted in the ability to restore order from chaos. At the heart of this system was the royal cubit, a standard of almost mystical importance. This was not a rough measure based on a pharaoh's arm, but a physical artifact of supreme craftsmanship. Master artisans carved these rods from durable black granite, inscribing them with intricate divisions into smaller units known as palms and digits. A single royal cubit measured approximately 52.5 centimeters, and it was the ultimate standard against which all other measuring sticks in the kingdom were judged. This single object was the key to building an empire, ensuring that every tax assessor, every architect, and every surveyor worked in perfect harmony. Their tools were remarkably advanced. The merkhit, for instance, was a simple yet brilliant instrument consisting of a palm rib with a slit cut into it, attached to a plumb line. An astronomer priest would use it to sight the stars, creating a true north-south meridian line across the sky. This celestial alignment was then transferred directly to the ground, allowing the Egyptians to orient their temples and pyramids with breathtaking accuracy. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built over 4,500 years ago, aligns to the cardinal directions with an error of less than 1/15 of a single degree. This is not just impressive, it is a whisper across millennia, a testament to a culture that saw no separation between the earthly and the cosmic. Their measurements were a form of worship, a way of bringing the perfect order of the heavens down to earth. This sacred geometry, born from the mud of the Nile, set a standard of precision that would not be rivaled for thousands of years. But as these two great civilizations flourished, a new power was rising in the Aegean, one that would take the concept of measurement in a radically different direction, away from the absolute decrees of god-kings and toward the hands of everyday citizens. Picture a Mesopotamian merchant carefully placing a duck-shaped stone weight onto one side of a simple balance scale. On the other side, they pour shimmering silver dust, the universal currency of the Bronze Age, until the two pans hang in perfect equilibrium. This quiet moment was the engine of international trade, a transaction built entirely on trust in a shared system of mass. Both Mesopotamia and Egypt developed these systems with remarkable sophistication. The Mesopotamian shekel, for instance, was not an abstract number. It was defined by a specific count of barley grains, a direct and tangible link to the very source of life and sustenance. 60 of these shekels made a mina, and 60 minas made a talent, a unit so large it required a strong man to lift. This sexagesimal system, based on the number 60, was a mathematical marvel that reflected their advanced understanding, and it still echoes in our 60-minute hours and 60-second minutes today. In Egypt, the central unit was the deben, a weight of about 13.5 grams, often represented by rings of copper or silver. A deben was not a coin, but a measure, a way to state that a sack of grain or a length of linen was worth, say, 5 deben of copper. This allowed for a vibrant barter economy to function with a precise and agreed-upon sense of value. the artifacts left behind are not merely tools, they are works of art. Exquisitely carved duck weights from Mesopotamia, often inscribed with the name of a king, tell us something profound. They were not just functional, they were symbols of authority and integrity. A merchant using an official royal weight was participating in a system guaranteed by the state itself. The discovery of nearly identical weights in ruins hundreds of miles apart reveals something staggering: a vast network of trade where a merchant from the Indus Valley could do business in a Mesopotamian port city with confidence. This shared language of weight created the first threads of globalization, binding disparate cultures together through commerce. But as these networks expanded, a new problem emerged. How could you ensure that a Hittite mina was truly equivalent to an Assyrian one? The need for international coordination was becoming undeniable, setting the stage for a crisis that would require a diplomatic solution. The silent, orderly streets of Mohenjo-Daro hold a secret as profound as any royal decree. Here, in the meticulously planned cities of the Indus Valley, we find a standardization so complete it rivals that of Egypt and Mesopotamia, yet it was achieved without a single translated word of command. The evidence is baked into the very bricks of the city. Across hundreds of miles from Harappa to Mohenjo-Daro, fired bricks were manufactured to a consistent ratio of 4:2:1. This was not a happy accident. It was a deliberate, widely adopted standard that allowed for the construction of massive, uniform structures and complex drainage systems. Even more telling are the small, meticulously crafted stone cubes archaeologists have unearthed. These are weights, and they follow a clean, logical decimal progression, doubling in a perfect sequence. A 1-unit weight, then a 2, a 4, an 8, and so on. This is the binary system of the ancient world, a testament to a society that thought in clear mathematical terms. But who was enforcing this remarkable uniformity? With their script still undeciphered, we have no Rosetta Stone to reveal a central ruler's edict. There are no grand palaces shouting of a powerful pharaoh, no vast royal tombs filled with inscribed cubit rods. This presents a fascinating enigma. Was this a society governed not by the explicit command of a king, but by a deep-seated cultural consensus? Perhaps centuries of shared practice and mutual benefit led to an unspoken agreement on the best way to build, to trade, to live together in urban harmony. The very precision of their cities, with streets laid out on perfect grids and houses connected to sophisticated water management systems, is a silent, compelling argument for a highly organized and collaborative society. This challenges our fundamental assumption that top-down authority is the only path to order. The Indus Valley civilization may have achieved its remarkable consistency through a shared vision, a cultural blueprint so powerful it required no written law to enforce. The influence of this silent, sophisticated system may have spread its ideas of order and measurement far beyond its own borders, leaving a legacy we are only beginning to appreciate. Yet, as one system of order flourished in the Indus Valley, a very different approach was taking shape on the shores of the Mediterranean, one that would place the power of measurement directly into the hands of its citizens. A Mycenaean merchant's bronze scale dips under the familiar weight of a Cypriot copper ingot, a transaction made possible by an unspoken agreement that spanned the sea. Across the bustling ports of the eastern Mediterranean, from the palaces of the Hittites to the workshops of the Minoans, a quiet revolution was unfolding. This was the birth of a shared commercial language, a pragmatic convergence of measurement standards that wove disparate cultures into a single, complex economy. It was not imposed by a treaty or a conquering emperor, but forged in the fires of commerce. The flow of essential goods, copper and tin for bronze, fine pottery, and precious luxury items, demanded a common understanding of value. A merchant did not need to speak the same language as his trading partner if their balance scales used weights that matched. the Egyptian deben, a unit of weight for copper and silver, found its way into the account tablets of Mycenaean Greece. The Mesopotamian shekel, born from barley grains, became a reference point for valuing goods across Anatolia. This was metrology in action, a tool for building trust across vast distances. The evidence for this proto-globalized network lies in shipwrecks like the one at Uluburun, off the coast of modern Turkey. The sunken vessel carried a cargo of international riches, and among them were sets of balance weights. These carefully shaped stones, often in the form of animals or geometric shapes, conformed to a recognizable system. A merchant from the Levant could sink his ship in Aegean waters, and the weights recovered centuries later would still be perfectly understandable to a trader from a different civilization entirely. This was a world talking to itself through mass and measure. How did such alignment happen without a central authority? It was the invisible hand of the market, a relentless pressure for efficiency. If your weights did not align with those used in the major trading hubs, your goods would be harder to sell, your profits diminished. Over generations, successful merchants adopted the most widely recognized standards, creating a de facto international system. This convergence was one of humanity's first great experiments in economic cooperation, a testament to our innate drive to connect and exchange. But this intricate web of trade was fragile, and its eventual collapse would plunge the region into a dark age, forcing a radical reinvention of the very idea of measurement. While the Mediterranean world grappled with the collapse of bronze, a different kind of order was being perfected in the East. Ancient China wove measurement into the very fabric of the universe, creating a system where a standard ruler was as much a philosophical statement as a tool for building. The legendary Yellow Emperor was credited not just with uniting the land, but with unifying its measures, declaring standard lengths, capacities, and weights to dispel chaos and manifest harmony. This was not merely an administrative act, it was a cosmic one. The resulting system, meticulously detailed in texts like the Zhu Lai, was a masterpiece of integrated thought. The fundamental unit of length, the kai, was not derived from a king's forearm. It was derived from the pitch of a perfectly tuned pipe. The note produced by a specific length of bamboo became the foundation for all other measures, linking distance to the music of the spheres. Volume, weight, and length were all designed to be in resonance with one another and with the cycles of the heavens. A grain of millet had a defined width, 12 of them made a Chinese inch, and 10 inches defined the kai. This created an elegant, interlocking web where agriculture, music, mathematics, and astronomy all spoke the same metrological language. The kai, the cheng for volume, and the jin for weight were thus more than practical necessities for tax collection or construction. They were instruments of statecraft, believed to keep the human realm in alignment with the natural and celestial orders. When an emperor ensured his measures were true, he was performing a sacred duty, maintaining the mandate of heaven itself. This philosophical depth created one of history's most stable and enduring systems of measurement, a framework so robust it supported the vast bureaucracy of successive dynasties for thousands of years. Here, the act of measuring was a form of governance, a way of writing cosmic law into the walls of a city and the contents of a merchant's bowl. This vision of a universe bound by harmonious number was a profound achievement, yet on the other side of the world, a different kind of revolution was brewing, one that would seek to measure not with celestial pipes, but with the unwavering logic of geometry and reason. The Greeks looked upon the world and saw not a collection of royal decrees, but a puzzle to be solved with reason. While their city-states still bickered over the exact length of a Greek foot, their philosophers were dreaming of a standard that could transcend local quarrels entirely. Thinkers like Aristotle pondered the very nature of measurement itself, asking what a truly universal unit would look like, one derived not from a king's whim but from the immutable laws of the cosmos. This was a seismic shift in thought, a move away from measurement as an instrument of power and toward measurement as a tool for discovering fundamental truths. The practical reality on the ground remained messy, with each polis clinging to its own traditions, but the intellectual groundwork was being laid for a system grounded in nature, not in human authority. The crowning achievement of this new mindset came from the librarian Eratosthenes. He heard a story about a well in the city of Syene, where on the summer solstice the sun shone directly overhead, illuminating the bottom with no shadow. In his home city of Alexandria, however, a vertical stick cast a clear shadow at that same moment. To anyone else, this was a simple curiosity. To Eratosthenes, it was a measurement. He understood that the difference in the shadow's angle represented the curvature of the earth itself. By meticulously measuring that angle and knowing the overland distance between the two cities, he performed a calculation of breathtaking elegance, arriving at a figure for the planet's circumference that was astonishingly close to the actual value. He measured the entire world using little more than a stick, a shadow, and the power of a reasoning mind. This was not about standardizing trade or collecting taxes. It was pure, abstract inquiry, a demonstration that the universe could be measured and understood through mathematics and observation. This shift from arbitrary authority to reasoned inquiry planted a seed that would lay dormant for centuries, a revolutionary idea that true measurement belonged not to the palace but to the cosmos. A Roman surveyor and agrimentor stood at the edge of a newly conquered wilderness, his Groma planted firmly in the soil. This simple instrument, a cross of wood with plumb lines hanging from each arm, was as powerful a weapon as any legion. With it, he could cast an invisible grid of order across the landscape, laying out the perfectly straight roads and the regimented plots of a new military colony. For Rome, measurement was not a suggestion, it was the very architecture of empire. They mastered the art of standardization, imposing units like the pes, the Roman foot, and the modius for grain, from the misty frontiers of Britain to the sun-baked markets of Egypt. In the heart of every major town, a bronze measurement table was fixed in the forum, a public promise of fairness. Here, a merchant could verify that his measuring rod matched the official standard, ensuring that taxes were fair and trade was transparent across thousands of miles. This was measurement as a tool of control, a silent language of administration that bound diverse cultures into a single, manageable whole. The relentless practicality of the Roman system, designed for engineers and quartermasters, gave it a durability that outlasted the empire itself. Long after the legions were gone and the roads fell into disrepair, the ghost of the Roman foot continued to walk through the marketplaces and royal decrees of medieval Europe, a permanent imprint of a lost order. Yet this very practicality also contained a hidden flaw, a seed of chaos that would blossom in the centuries to come. The flaw in Rome's practical system was its very rigidity. When the empire fractured, its standardized foot shattered into 1,000 local variations, creating a chaos of measures that would plague Europe for 1,000 years. But centuries before that fragmentation, another empire had already discovered a different path to unity. The Achaemenid Persian Empire stretched across the known world, from the banks of the Indus to the shores of the Nile. Its administrators gazed upon a mosaic of conquered peoples, each with their own sacred cubits, their own minas, their own deeply ingrained ways of measuring the world. To govern this incredible diversity, a simple imposition of one standard would have been a recipe for constant rebellion. Instead, the Persians chose a path of brilliant pragmatism. They understood that measurement was not just about control, it was about communication. The result was not a single system, but a grand synthesis. The central authority maintained its own official standards, the royal cubit and the shekel, for the crucial business of the state, particularly for assessing the tribute that flowed from every satrapy, every province to the royal treasury. Yet on the local level, in the bazaars of Babylon and the workshops of Egypt, people were often permitted to continue using their familiar units. Persian tax collectors became masters of conversion, using established ratios to seamlessly translate local harvests into standardized amounts of silver or grain owed to the king. This was metrological integration, a policy that valued stability and efficiency over pure uniformity. The most powerful symbol of this effort was the Royal Road, a marvel of engineering stretching over 2,500 kilometers. Along its entire length, distance was marked not by vague days of travel, but by the standardized parasang. This unit, roughly equivalent to the distance a caravan could walk in an hour, created a predictable and reliable map for imperial messengers, soldiers, and merchants. A traveler could set out from Sardis and know precisely how many parasangs lay between them and the great capital of Susa. This network of measured distance bound the empire together with threads of predictable time and space, enabling not just command and control, but the flourishing of trade on an unprecedented scale. The Persian synthesis proved that an empire could be united without being uniform, that a shared language of measurement could be built through incorporation rather than obliteration. This delicate balance between central authority and local tradition was a staggering administrative achievement, yet it too would eventually fade into history, leaving behind a crucial question. If empires rise and fall, taking their measurement standards with them, where can humanity possibly find a unit of measure that is truly eternal? The search for an eternal standard was a philosophical dream, but on the Indian subcontinent, measurement was a matter of both cosmic and earthly law. Ancient India wove a complex tapestry where the sacred dimensions of a fire altar, dictated by the Vedas, coexisted with the precise weights and measures of a sprawling imperial economy. This was a world where a priest and a tax collector might use the same fundamental units but for profoundly different purposes. The spiritual roots ran deep. Vedic texts prescribed the exact proportions for constructing sacrificial altars, with every brick and every dimension carrying ritual significance. A misaligned altar was not just a structural error, it was a spiritual failure, a potential disruption to the cosmic order. From this sacred geometry emerged units like the angular, based on the width of a finger, and the danus, the length of a bow. These anthropometric measures connected the human form to the divine plan, a familiar concept seen across the ancient world. Yet this spiritual framework was soon harnessed by the machinery of the state. The Mauryan Empire, one of the largest the world had ever seen, could not function on ritual alone. Its legendary manual of statecraft, the Arthashastra, reads like a metrological blueprint for running a complex nation. It describes a comprehensive system of weights and measures, all overseen by a powerful superintendent. This official was responsible for inspecting the balances and measures used in marketplaces, stamping them with his seal to certify their accuracy, and imposing severe penalties for fraud. The goal was starkly practical: to ensure economic stability, guarantee fair taxation, and prevent the cheating that could erode public trust. The artifacts left behind tell this story of central control. Archaeologists have uncovered exquisitely carved stone weights from Mauryan sites, each one a physical manifestation of the state's authority. These were not rough stones, but polished cubes and polyhedrons, their consistent mass a silent promise of fairness in every transaction from the royal treasury to the local grain market. This was the genius of the Indian system, its enduring strength. It managed to harmonize the spiritual imperative for cosmic order with the administrative need for earthly control, creating a metrological tradition that was both deeply philosophical and ruthlessly pragmatic. This delicate balance between the sacred and the secular would prove remarkably resilient, even as another wave of change began to form far to the west, where a new faith was preparing to carry its own unique standards across continents. Across the ocean, a different kind of measurement was being carved into stone under the Central American sun. Entirely isolated from the debates over cubits and shekels, the Maya and Aztec civilizations built their understanding of order around two great pillars, time and the land itself. Their systems were not tools for imperial taxation or long-distance trade, but were woven into the very fabric of existence, dictating the rhythms of ceremony and the reality of survival. The Maya achievement in measuring time remains one of the most staggering intellectual feats in human history. They did not track one calendar, but several that interlocked like cosmic gears. The sacred Tzolk'in cycle of 260 days danced with the solar Hab year of 365 days, creating a larger calendar round that would only repeat every 52 years. Beyond this, they maintained the long count, a linear timeline that calculated vast epochs with breathtaking accuracy. This was not mere stargazing. It was a complex mathematical machine for navigating the cycles of life, divinity, and history, a system of timekeeping so precise it could predict celestial events millennia in the future. This obsession with cosmic order was mirrored on the Earth by a deeply practical system for measuring land. Here, the tools were humble. The Aztec cubital, for instance, was not an abstract unit. It represented a specific area of farmland measured with ropes that was understood to be sufficient to support a single family. The mecate, a length of rope itself, was the standard tool for laying out these plots. Can you sense the profound difference in purpose? Where an Egyptian royal cubit was about building monuments to eternity, a cubital was about sustaining life in the present. It was a unit of subsistence, a direct measure of human need translated into territory. This independent path to quantification reveals something fundamental. The drive to measure our world is a universal human constant, as innate as language, but the forms it takes are shaped by what a culture holds most sacred, whether that is a pharaoh's divine power, a merchant's profit, or the perfect, predictable turning of the heavens. The Maya looked up and saw a universe of number. The Aztec looked at the earth and saw a grid of survival. Both created systems of profound sophistication, proving that the quest for order can blossom in countless different forms, even when worlds apart. Far from the monolithic stone cubits of Egypt, a different kind of standard was being forged in the gold-rich forests of West Africa. Here, measurement was not just a tool for administration, but a vibrant art form integrated into the very soul of commerce and culture. The Akan people developed a system of weighing gold dust using exquisite small weights crafted from brass and bronze. These were not simple cubes or spheres. Known as emramu, they were miniature masterpieces, cast into intricate geometric patterns or figures that illustrated proverbs and encoded wisdom. A weight might depict a spider, symbolizing patience and cunning, or two birds sharing a single beak, speaking to the importance of cooperation. Every transaction became a moment of cultural reinforcement, a reminder that value was measured not only in gold but in shared knowledge and social bonds. This system was the engine of the vast trans-Saharan trade networks, allowing for the fair exchange of gold for salt and other goods across immense distances. But gold dust was not the only currency of measure. In other parts of the continent, value was quantified through beautifully woven strips of cloth, their lengths and patterns signaling a precise, agreed-upon worth. The cowrie shell, imported from the Indian Ocean, became another universal unit, its familiar shape and rarity making it a form of money that circulated across thousands of miles. These diverse systems reveal a profound truth. The drive to create standards is a fundamental human impulse, one that blossoms wherever people come together to build, to trade, and to create meaning. It did not require a pyramid or a ziggurat to spark this innovation. It emerged wherever complex societies needed to communicate value and foster trust. The story of measurement is not a single thread originating in a few celebrated river valleys, but a brilliant tapestry woven from countless local geniuses, each contributing a unique pattern to our shared history. This global phenomenon sets the stage for the next great challenge, one that would eventually demand a single, universal standard for the entire world. The chaos of 1,000 local measures met its match not in a king's decree, but in the pragmatic clamor of the marketplace. In the bustling ports of the ancient Mediterranean, a ship's captain from Phoenicia might be bartering with a Greek merchant, their goods piled high on the docks. One measured cloth in cubits, the other in feet. One weighed silver in shekels, the other in drachmas. Every transaction was a potential argument, a moment where trust could fray and a deal could collapse. Out of this relentless pressure for clarity, a new language was born, not of words but of conversion. Merchants, the unsung diplomats of measurement, developed their own rough and ready tables, mental or written, for translating one system into another. They learned that a certain Phoenician cubit was roughly equal to 1.5 Greek feet, or that a specific Egyptian deben of copper could be fairly traded for a set number of Mesopotamian shekels of silver. This was standardization driven not by imperial command, but by mutual need. The most reliable, widely traveled units naturally rose to the top, becoming de facto trade standards recognized from the Levant to the Aegean. Seafaring peoples like the Phoenicians were the vital carriers of these ideas. Their ships, laden with goods, also carried a cargo of metrological consensus, spreading familiar weights and measures from port to port, creating a web of understood value that transcended political borders and languages. This bottom-up, commercially driven alignment was a quiet, relentless force. It proved that the pursuit of profit could be as powerful as a pharaoh's word in weaving the world together. While kings built empires with their official cubits, merchants were building a global marketplace with their balanced scales and conversion rates, laying the groundwork for a world where value could travel as freely as a ship on the open sea. This commercial network created a fragile unity, but it was a unity constantly tested by the sheer diversity of human invention. The quest for ever finer measurement was not born in the marketplace, but in the silent observation of the stars. Ancient astronomers, gazing at the heavens, demanded a precision that rough approximations of length and weight could never satisfy. Their work created a feedback loop of discovery, where scientific ambition forged the tools it needed to succeed. The Babylonians, master calculators, gave us a legacy embedded in our clocks and maps. Their base 60 mathematical system, a brilliant choice for its divisibility, defined the 360-degree circle and the 60-minute hour. These were not arbitrary numbers, but the product of a culture that saw the universe in elegant, calculable patterns. For them, mathematics was the ultimate measuring stick, a way to reduce the chaotic movements of the planets to predictable, numerical order. This intellectual framework was a gift passed down through the ages. Later, Greek astronomers like Hipparchus took up the challenge, needing to chart the stars with even greater exactness. How do you measure the tiny, slow dance of the precession of the equinoxes without instruments of incredible sensitivity? This hunger for data led to the creation of massive bronze devices, intricate armillary spheres, and geared mechanisms that were the supercomputers of their age. The stunning Antikythera mechanism, recovered from an ancient shipwreck, is a testament to this drive. Its complex interlocking gears, calculating celestial cycles with breathtaking accuracy, required a level of craftsmanship that pushed the very boundaries of what was possible. The artisans who built it were not just metal workers, they were masters of microscopic tolerances, working to a standard of precision that would not be commonplace for over 1,000 years. Every tooth on those tiny bronze gears had to be measured and cut with flawless consistency, or the entire mechanism's predictions would fail. This was the moment measurement transcended the earthly realm of trade and construction, becoming the essential partner of pure scientific inquiry. Better tools unveiled deeper mysteries of the cosmos, and those new mysteries, in turn, demanded even better tools. This self-reinforcing cycle of curiosity and craftsmanship would ultimately prepare the world for its next great leap, a revolution in thought that sought to find a single, natural standard for all humankind. A perfect cubit was more than a tool, it was a prayer in stone. For many ancient builders, the act of measuring was a sacred dialogue with the divine, where a misplaced digit could risk cosmic disorder, not merely a structural flaw. This spiritual imperative transformed the construction of temples and altars into a form of worship, demanding a level of precision that mere commerce could never require. The biblical specifications for Noah's Ark, given as 300 cubits in length, 50 in width, and 30 in height, were not just a set of building instructions. They were a divine blueprint, making the cubit itself a vessel of faith, a unit consecrated by its role in a story of salvation. This pattern repeats across the globe. In the Vedic traditions of India, the precise dimensions of a fire altar were not a matter of architectural preference, but a ritual necessity for maintaining harmony between the human and cosmic realms. Similarly, the ancient Chinese philosophies of Feng Shui and the Indian Vastu Shastra are built upon the conviction that the measurements of a space, the alignment of a door, or the proportions of a room directly influence the flow of energy and, by extension, the health and fortune of its inhabitants. A building designed according to these principles was not just a shelter, it was a living entity in balance with the universe. Can you sense the immense pressure this placed on the master craftsmen? Their work held the spiritual well-being of the community in their hands. An error was not a simple miscalculation to be corrected with a new brick, it was a theological transgression. This profound responsibility created the most powerful incentive imaginable for preserving standards across countless generations. The sacred cubit rod stored in the temple's inner sanctum was more than a reference, it was a holy relic, its unchanging length a testament to eternal truths. In this fusion of faith and geometry, we find one of the oldest and most powerful guardians of metrological order, a system upheld not by the fear of a tax collector, but by the reverence for the gods themselves. The cord stretched taut between two stakes was humanity's first ruler. A simple rope with knots tied at regular intervals allowed our ancestors to mark out fields, lay the foundations for huts, and define the boundaries of their world. This was the genesis of the toolmaker's art in service of measurement. But as ambitions grew from a single home to an entire city, these basic implements had to evolve. The knotted cord could measure length, but it could not ensure a wall was perfectly vertical or that an aqueduct sloped at just the right angle to carry water. For that, new tools of breathtaking ingenuity were required. The Egyptian plumb bob, a simple weight suspended on a string, used the unerring pull of gravity to define a true vertical line. Paired with a sighting instrument called a bay, a notched palm rib, their architects could transfer celestial alignments directly to the desert floor. These were the instruments that built the pyramids, tools that translated cosmic order into stone and mortar. The Romans, masters of engineering, took this further. Their Groma, a cross of wood with plumb lines hanging from each arm, allowed surveyors to stake out perfect right angles across entire landscapes, creating the relentless grids of their military camps and city plans. For leveling vast distances, they employed the chorobates, a long wooden frame with water channels carved along its top. When the water settled to an equal height at both ends, the engineer knew the surface was perfectly level, a principle as reliable then as it is today. These were not mere gadgets, they were the physical embodiment of a standard. A royal cubit inscribed on a granite rod was useless if the tools for applying it were crude and inconsistent. Quality of these instruments was paramount. They were crafted from bronze that would not warp and hardstone that would not wear, designed for a lifetime of exacting work. Their creation and, crucially, their certification by a central authority marked a revolutionary step. a builder arriving at a worksite could trust that his plumb bob and his colleagues had been checked against the same master standard. This assurance enabled a new scale of coordinated labor where thousands of workers, often speaking different languages, could contribute to a single, cohesive structure, all guided by the silent, unwavering authority of their tools. A king's granite weight was absolute, but his royal grain jar was a vessel of doubt. This was the profound challenge of volume, a measurement trapped by the imperfect art of the potter. While a stone weight could be carved to near perfection and a metal rod inscribed with flawless lines, a standard container for grain or wine was a different matter entirely. Its accuracy lived and died with the thickness of its walls, the curve of its belly, and the skill of the hands that shaped it. Civilizations from Egypt to Rome established official units like the hecat for grain and the towering amphora for wine, but their reliability was fragile. An amphora was not a single, perfect vessel. It was a category, a target volume that countless potters aimed for with varying degrees of success. The solution was as ingenious as it was necessary. Central authorities created master standard containers, meticulously crafted and often marked with an official seal. These reference jars were the law. A merchant bringing his own amphorae to the docks would have them filled from the standard measure, their true capacity ratified against the state's unchanging ideal. This act of calibration in the public square was a daily performance of trust, a reassurance that the volume of grain paid in tax or the wine sold at market was fair. But the ancients did not stop there. They developed a brilliant system of cross-referencing to outwit this inherent imprecision. They knew that a specific weight of a universal commodity, like wheat or barley, should always produce a predictable volume. If a merchant was suspicious of his grain measure, he could pour its contents onto a balance scale and check it against the official stone weight. If the weight was correct, the volume was trusted. This elegant loop connecting mass to capacity was a testament to their pragmatic genius, a way of using one reliable standard to police another, less certain one. This constant, low-grade struggle with the humble clay pot reveals a deeper truth about the ancient world's relationship with order. Imposing abstract, perfect standards onto the messy, physical reality of everyday life was a battle fought not just with royal decrees, but with every jar of oil, every basket of dates, and every clever workaround that kept commerce and community from descending into dispute. This very struggle, however, would eventually push human ingenuity toward its next great breakthrough, one that sought to eliminate the potter's human error entirely by finding a standard not in any man-made object, but in the perfect, unchanging geometry of the earth itself. A king's word carved in stone could finally tame the chaos of the marketplace. The Code of Hammurabi, etched onto a towering black diorite steel, did not just deal with matters of theft or violence, it addressed the very tools of commerce. One of its statutes explicitly declared that if a merchant used a lightweight or a small measure to cheat his customers, his hand would be severed. This was not mere cruelty, it was a stark declaration of a new principle, that economic justice was the bedrock of the state, and reliable measurement was its non-negotiable guardian. The penalty was severe because the crime struck at the heart of public trust, eroding the fragile bonds that held a complex society together. This legal philosophy was not confined to Babylon. Centuries later, the Hebrew Bible echoed this same conviction in the book of Deuteronomy, commanding the people to have a perfect and just weight, a perfect and just measure. The language here is profoundly moral, framing honest measurement as a divine requirement for a righteous community. These royal and divine decrees mark a pivotal transition, moving measurement from the realm of informal local custom into the formal domain of codified law. It was no longer just about what was practical, it was about what was right. To make this principle tangible, standard weights and measures were placed on public display in temples and bustling market squares. A citizen did not have to take a merchant's word for it. they could bring their own container to the official granite block and see for themselves if the volume was true. This act of public verification turned a metrological standard into a symbol of civic integrity, a physical promise from the governing power that fairness would be upheld for all. The ruler was no longer just a tool for building. It had become an instrument of justice, and its consistent application was now a core responsibility of any state that sought to endure. This legal framework, born in the ancient Near East, established a precedent that would resonate for millennia, setting the stage for even more ambitious attempts to unify the world under a single, perfect measure. A royal decree could enforce a standard within an empire, but its journey beyond those borders was a far more complex story. The spread of measurement knowledge was not a single event but a slow, relentless tide carried on the boots of soldiers, in the packs of colonists, and most enduringly in the cargo of merchants. When a Roman legion established a new colony, its surveyors laid out the streets using the Roman foot, implanting that unit into the foreign soil like a seed. Colonists arriving from distant shores brought with them the familiar measures of their homeland, using them to build homes and establish farms, creating pockets of their old metrological world in a new land. Yet the most powerful agent of change was often trade. A merchant dealing with a foreign partner had a simple choice: adapt or fail. They learned to use their trading partners' weights and measures, or they developed rough conversion rates, creating a pidgin language of value that allowed commerce to flow. This was how systems hybridized, not through conquest but through mutual convenience. A local unit of length might persist for generations, but a merchant might begin quoting prices in a more widely recognized weight, like the shekel, for certain high-value goods. This created a layered system where old and new units coexisted, each finding its niche in the complex ecosystem of daily life. The Silk Road stands as the ultimate example of this organic exchange. For over 1,000 years, this network of routes was a conduit for far more than silk and spices. Caravans carried ideas, astronomical charts, and mathematical texts between China, India, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean. A unit of weight from India might find itself used in a Central Asian bazaar, while a Persian standard for cloth might slowly influence practices further east. This was a cross-pollination of practicality, where the most useful and reliable standards gradually gained wider acceptance. Perhaps the most profound fusion occurred in the wake of Alexander the Great's conquests. The Hellenistic period created a world where Greek culture mingled with the ancient traditions of Egypt and Mesopotamia. In the Great Library of Alexandria, Greek geometers studied Egyptian land surveying techniques. The Greek stadion, a unit of distance, was used alongside the Egyptian cubit in new cosmopolitan cities. This was not a replacement of one system by another, but a true synthesis, a meeting of minds that enriched the mathematical and metrological toolkit of the entire known world. The journey of a standard was never a simple story of imposition. It was a negotiation, a slow dance of adoption and adaptation, proving that the tools we use to measure our world are as mobile and malleable as the people who use them. The grand edifice of Roman measurement crumbled along with the empire itself. Across Europe, the public standard in the forum was replaced by a bewildering array of local rules. A pound of bread in one town might be a very different weight from a pound of bread in the next village over. The very word foot could mean a dozen different lengths, often defined by the statue of a local saint or the whim of a feudal lord. This was not a simple inconvenience, it was a profound barrier to commerce and cooperation. A merchant traveling between regions became a negotiator, constantly translating one obscure standard into another, a process ripe for confusion and distrust. Even within a single city, different trade guilds might insist on their own unique measures for cloth, for grain, for wine, creating a labyrinth of conflicting rules. Into this chaos stepped the Emperor Charlemagne, who recognized that a fractured empire needed unified measures to function. His Carolingian reform was a monumental effort to reimpose a single standard for the pound and the foot across his vast domains. Yet without the relentless administrative machinery of Rome to enforce it, the reform could not take deep root. Its influence faded, leaving behind a legacy of ambition rather than lasting change. This medieval patchwork is a stark lesson in the fragility of complex systems. The shared language of measurement, so carefully built over millennia, can dissolve into a cacophony of local dialects when the central authority that guards it disappears. This very breakdown, however, created a vacuum, a deep and widespread hunger for a new kind of order. The stage was now set for a revolution that would seek not to revive a fallen empire's standards, but to find a measure for all people for all time. Galileo Galilei, watching a lamp swing in a cathedral, saw more than a simple motion. He saw a clock. This insight that a pendulum's swing was governed by a natural rhythm signaled a profound break from the past. The scientific revolution was not content with measuring the world. It sought to measure the universe itself, using the language of mathematics. Figures like Galileo and Isaac Newton revealed a cosmos that ran like a perfect machine, its operations dictated by elegant, discoverable laws. But to prove these laws, they needed more than the king's foot or the merchant's cubit. They needed a standard that was as universal and unchanging as the laws they were describing. The pendulum became the great hope. Its period, the time of each swing, depended primarily on its length and the force of gravity, a fundamental force of nature. If a pendulum's length could be defined to swing with a precise period, perhaps once per second, then that length itself could become a new, natural unit of measure. This was a radical idea. It meant that any scientist anywhere in the world could recreate the standard unit simply by building a pendulum and counting its swings. The authority for measurement was shifting from the palace to the laboratory, from a carved rod in a vault to an observable phenomenon in the physical world. This philosophical leap was the essential precursor to the metric system. It established the audacious goal of finding a unit derived not from human tradition, but from the very fabric of the planet. The quest was no longer for a standard that was merely consistent, but for one that was truly eternal, a constant written into the cosmos. This intellectual foundation would soon inspire a daring plan to extract a new measure directly from the Earth's own dimensions. The cacophony of 1,000 local measures reached its peak in the streets of pre-revolutionary France. A merchant traveling from one province to the next faced a dizzying array of different feet, pounds, and pints, a system that seemed designed to confuse and exploit. This was not just an inconvenience, it was a powerful symbol of the old regime's inefficiency and deep-seated inequality. The same unit could have one value for the commoner paying a tax and another for the nobleman collecting it, a constant reminder of an arbitrary and unjust world. Into this turmoil stepped the thinkers of the Enlightenment, who believed that reason and nature, not tradition and privilege, should be the foundation of human affairs. Their radical solution was the metric system, a child of pure logic and democratic ideals. They sought a standard that belonged to no king, no nation, but to the planet itself. They defined the meter as 1/10,000,000th of the distance from the North Pole to the equator, a length literally drawn from the circumference of the Earth. This was a staggering act of ambition, a measure for all people for all time. To make it effortlessly usable, they built it on a decimal base, a system of tens that mirrored the 10 digits on our hands. Suddenly, calculations that once required complex conversion tables became simple matters of moving a decimal point. The initial rollout was met with resistance, as people clung to the familiar units they had known their entire lives. But the power of the idea was undeniable. This was not merely a new set of measurements, it was the ultimate culmination of an ancient quest. It was the same dream that animated the Egyptian surveyor with his royal cubit and the Mesopotamian merchant with his shekel, the desire for a universal language of value and order. now realized through the lens of science and reason. The metric system represented a final, decisive break from the human body and the king's decree, reaching instead for a cosmic scale. Yet, this new global standard would soon face its own set of challenges on the world stage, as the legacy of empires and the pride of nations created new frontiers in the long war for measurement. That 12-inch ruler sitting in your desk drawer is a direct descendant of the Egyptian royal cubit. The evolution of measurement did not end with the rise of the metric system. It simply layered new standards over ancient foundations that still surround us every single day. Look at any clock. The fact that an hour is divided into 60 minutes and each minute into 60 seconds is not a modern convenience. It is a gift from the Babylonian mathematicians who saw the elegance of base 60, a system so practical it has ticked on for thousands of years. Every time you check the time, you are reading a Babylonian calculation. When you use a protractor to measure an angle, the 360 degrees of a circle is another legacy of that same ancient numerical wisdom. And then there is the stubborn persistence of the inch and the foot, units that were standardized from Roman predecessors and now define daily life in a few nations like the United States. The very word ruler comes from the Latin word for king, a reminder that this tool was once an extension of royal authority, a physical representation of the state's power to define order. That humble foot is a ghost of the Roman pace, a unit born from the stride of a legionary. The inch is thought to have been derived from the width of a man's thumb, a direct echo of the body-centered measures used by the very first farmers. This enduring presence is more than a historical curiosity. It is a testament to the incredible durability of good ideas. Our sleek, digital world is built upon layers of ancient innovation and hard-won practical wisdom. Every time you take a step, glance at a clock, or draw a line, you are participating in a continuous thread that connects you to the architects of ziggurats, the merchants of the Silk Road, and the surveyors who first laid out the world with knotted cords. Our journey through the history of measurement uncovers a truth far greater than the story of rulers and scales. This is the epic of humanity's unyielding desire to impose order on chaos, to seek fairness in exchange, and to find meaning in the cosmos itself. Every standard ever created, from the farmer's stride to the astronomer's degree, is a testament to this profound need. We have witnessed how a simple cubit was not just a length of wood, but an instrument of pharaonic power. We saw how a shekel of silver was more than a weight. It was a token of trust that could bridge civilizations. This quest is a mirror, reflecting our own eternal search for truth and consistency in a world of constant change. The Roman philosopher Seneca once observed that it is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that they are difficult. Our ancestors dared. They measured the floodplains of the Nile and the stars in the heavens, and in doing so, they built the very framework of our modern existence. The next time you glance at a clock or use a ruler, take a moment to feel the weight of that history. Consider the millennia of human ingenuity, conflict, and cooperation held within that simple tool. What part of this ancient legacy resonates most with you? Share your reflections in the comments and join us as we continue to explore the great mysteries of our shared past.